Alright guys, Stas here. Finally, I'm here to do a review of the Digiboil 35 litre from Kegland. So I've been using this for the last probably six to 9 months. I use it as an HLT for my grainfather. You've probably seen me use it in brewing videos. This just fits all of my water that I need for a brew. So I'll fill this up, do my water treatment with phosphoric acid as well as any salts that I need for a brew, and then I'll pull off my strike water, and this will stay at sparging temp until I require it. So it works really well at that for that reason. I was thinking about buying the Grainfather, the sparge water heater. I think it's about 18 litres. I ended up going with this one instead because it's the same cost, and if I wanted to, I can have this double as a boiler if I wanted to do a double brew or a double batch down the line. So let's run over the features. Stainless steel construction. You've got your very basic display. When you turn it on, it defaults to 100 degrees Celsius. You can switch it from Fahrenheit to Celsius for those of you in the US. You've got your element selector here. You've got a 1900 watt and a 500 watt switch. Of course, together they produce 2400 watts or 2.4 kilowatts of heating power. And you've got your on and off switch on this side. And behind you've got some air vents to keep the elements cool, and you've got a nice heavy duty cord which is probably 1.5 to 2 meters long. To say what it's rated, the 3 gauge 1.5 millimeter squared cable, so it's nice and heavy duty. On the bottom you'll see, oops, I'm just going to drop that. On the bottom you'll see more vents, and 3 Phillips screwdrivers will open up access to the elements. I don't think I'll open it again. I did open it once. People were curious. It does look very tight in there, and they look like they're using pretty high quality components, although I am not an electrician, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. The lid, it's a lid. The handle, it's a pretty cheap plastic handle, but you know, it's machined fairly well inside. I'll give you a look inside. So you can see down the bottom there's a little nipple looking thing for the temperature probe, as well as your opening for the ball valve. Pretty simple looking thing, and you know, it's stood up pretty well to being an HLT with water additions being added. I did have some problem. I added some chalk on a brew and it didn't all dissolve, and I ended up with scorched, well, lots of burnt on organic matter on the bottom, a bit of phosphoric acid, and it was completely gone. So it's really easy to clean. It's got these little clips potentially for the distilling option that they have. I find it nice to just make sure the lid doesn't fall off. Of course I don't put them all down if I'm using this in normal use, probably just 2 just to make sure that the lid's not going to come off. So using this in practice, I think for what you pay, it was 149 Australian dollars, same price as the Grainfather sparge water urn. As I said, when you're buying this sort of stuff, it is cheap, and you can see how they have cut corners. Not necessarily cut corners, but it isn't as higher quality made as, you know, some higher end gear. Not necessarily the Grainfather sparge water heater, but I think for the purpose of an HLT, the build quality is adequate. It's good enough. Sure, you can spend more money and get better quality equipment, but for the purposes, I mean, it's totally fine. A couple of numbers. The amount of dead space in the bottom of this machine is about 1.4 litres by my measurements. It does have graduations on the back side for volume. Obviously these are embossed, so they're backwards. Up to 30 litres or 8 gallons. And they're pretty accurate. I did it by weight. I added water, these on a set of scales, and added water, and they were just a bit under from their weight at a ratio of 0.98 or 98% of the number. Now that's pretty close with the parallax of me looking down from an angle, and it's pretty hard to get a really accurate gauge of where you are when you're viewing down from on top. So it's pretty good, and I found that my numbers have been relatively good as well. In terms of heating power, I put 20 litres of water, which was at 22 degrees. That took 14 minutes to heat up to 52 degrees Celsius, and a total of 22 minutes to heat up to 70 degrees Celsius. So the 2400 watt elements, you know, they managed to get the water up to temp fairly quickly to get you on your brewing way. Yeah, that's basically it. It's a pretty straightforward thing. It's basically an urn which can be used for brewing. I think it's like a great value system. I know that Kegland are doing them as a introductory kit with a grain basket, a grain bag. If you want to get into brewing all grain in a brew in a bag, I think this would be really good. Also, as I'm using it as a HLT, it's a really good unit. The handles, they seem strong enough. I don't lift and move it when it's full of water. I probably would advise against that. But they do look sturdy enough, and I think they are basically a robo brew without the pump and all other things on the inside. So that's been my overall review of the Kegland Digiboil 35 litre. Yeah, if you're looking for an HLT, I think this is a really great way to go, really cost effective, and I haven't had any problems with it. My only thing that I wish maybe was different was every time I turn this on, it defaults to 100 degrees Celsius. It would be nice if it left it on, there was a memory chip to keep the same temperature that you had, but you know, I guess they had to, you know, keep costs down, and that's another piece of electronics. And it's probably better coming down from 100 degrees to the 75-ish degree rather than coming up from 0. And if you're worried about it turning on, kicking on when you turn it on, you have got separate on and off switches for the elements versus the on switch for the whole unit. So it's just something that I kind of wish there was an option to change it, but it's not a huge deal. Anyway, this has been Stas from Stas Brewing with my review of the Kegland Digiboil 35 litre. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.